What is it that lingers in the dark corners of our imagination, defying time and reason, whispering of death and decay? Enter Nosferatu, a name steeped in dread and fascination, evoking our deepest fears of the unknown. It is no mere monster of legend, however, but a shadowy spectre that has haunted folklore for centuries, entwined with tales of ancient superstitions and fears of the grave. The very name itself carries the weight of ages, as immortalized over a century ago by Professor Van Helsing in Bram Stoker's Dracula. The Nosferatu do not die like the bee when he sting once. He is only stronger, and being stronger, have yet more power to work evil. Good evening, and welcome to another captivating episode of SkaryTales, where myths and legends come alive under the moonlit sky. My name is Mr. Rook, your guide through these enigmatic hallowed halls, where we illuminate the obscure and whisper life into the forgotten. Tonight, in anticipation of the upcoming remake of the haunting classic Nosferatu, it seems only fitting to delve into the shadowy recesses of that which has sparked man's fear and intrigue for centuries. Together, we shall uncover its roots in ancient folklore, explore the superstitions that bound it to humanity's darkest fears, and examine the strange yet enduring legacy of the 1922 film that immortalized its name. Join me as we step together into this realm of darkness, where shadows dwell with the most ill intent. Prepare yourselves, for what you are about to see may linger long after the lights have dimmed. Welcome, dear friends, to SkaryTales. The origins of the term Nosferatu are as enigmatic as the creatures themselves, a name whispered across the centuries, shrouded in linguistic mystery and folkloric dread. While its precise roots remain contested, the word is often traced back to Romanian or Greek origins. Some scholars believe it derives from the Greek Nosophoros, meaning plague-bearer, a fitting title for a creature so closely associated with death and disease. Others suggest it springs from the Romanian nesuferit, a term for the insufferable or accursed. It was not until the 19th century, however, that Nosferatu entered the Western lexicon as a term synonymous with vampire. German authors, fascinated by the folklore of Eastern Europe, began incorporating it into their works, giving the word a new and terrifying prominence. Among them was Emily Gerard, a Scottish author whose 1885 essay, Transylvanian Superstitions, brought the term into the public eye. Gerard described the Nosferatu as a vampiric entity steeped in ancient superstition, a creature that preyed upon the living and haunted the shadows of the Carpathian Mountains. Her work, though ostensibly academic, became a touchstone for those seeking to understand the myths and fears of the region. It was Gerard's vivid descriptions that later inspired Bram Stoker in his creation of Dracula, linking the word Nosferatu forever to the Gothic imagination. Even now, the name carries an ominous weight, its whispered syllables conjuring images of plague, decay, and the relentless hunger of the undead. For much like the vampires it describes, Nosferatu refuses to die. Unlike the suave and seductive creatures of Gothic literature, the Nosferatu represents a far more primal and unsettling vision of vampirism. Stripped of elegance and charm, this figure emerges from folklore as a terrifying embodiment of decay and despair. Physically, the Nosferatu is described as grotesque in the extreme. Picture a gaunt and hunched figure, its flesh pallid and taut, stretched like parchment over angular bones, eyes sunken yet glowing with an unnatural hunger, and claw-like fingers that seem made for clutching at prey. Its teeth are not pristine fangs, but jagged instruments of brutality, tools for feeding rather than seducing. If Count Dracula is a predator cloaked in human finery, the Nosferatu is a predator stripped bare, its monstrous nature laid plain. Mannerisms further distinguish the Nosferatu from its later romanticized counterparts. Driven by an insatiable hunger, it stalks its victims with the calculated patience of a hunter. There is no allure, no whispered promises or hypnotic gazes to lure its prey willingly. Instead, the Nosferatu attacks with raw, animalistic ferocity, leaving nothing but death and fear in its wake. A defining trait of the Nosferatu is its association with plague and disease. In Eastern European folklore, vampires were not merely blood drinkers. They were harbingers of pestilence, spreading sickness wherever they went. The Nosferatu embodies this aspect fully, often depicted alongside vermin, most notably rats, creatures infamous for their role in carrying the Black Death. This connection reinforces its role as a force of nature's corruption, a blight upon both humanity and the land it inhabits. In its lairs, the natural world reflects this decay. Plants wither, the soil becomes barren, and the air hangs heavy with an unnatural stillness. Unlike other vampires whose homes might exude opulence, the Nosferatu's domain is one of ruin and desolation, a stark reminder of its role as a walking embodiment of death and decay. The Nosferatu also diverges from traditional vampire myths in its lack of allure. Where Dracula and his ilk seduce their victims, drawing them in with charm and guile, the Nosferatu preys upon them like a wolf stalking sheep. It is a creature of the shadows, not the ballroom, and this lack of sophistication only heightens the terror it inspires. This contrast underscores the divide between modern interpretations of vampires as tragic anti-heroes and the Nosferatu as a symbol of humanity's most primal fears. In the Nosferatu, we see the shadowy reflection of our fragility, a creature that forces us to confront not only the horrors of the grave, but the inevitability of our own decay. If the Nosferatu represents our deepest fears, then the superstitions surrounding them are humanity's desperate attempts to reclaim control over the uncontrollable. Deeply rooted in Eastern European lore, these creatures were not merely blood drinkers. They were harbingers of disease, death, and despair, shadowy figures that existed at the fringes of life and death. One particularly chilling superstition ties the Nosferatu to the sacred yet paradoxical day of Christmas. In some traditions, it was believed that children born on Christmas Day, intended to be pure and blessed, were cursed instead, as their birth was seen as a blasphemous competition with Christ himself. Such children, marked by fate, were said to be at risk of becoming vampires after death, their souls forever tied to the void. To combat such terrors, ancient communities devised a host of macabre measures to ensure the restless dead stayed buried. These rituals were as varied as the regions from which they hailed, yet all shared a single purpose: to sever the vampire's ties to the living world. The most infamous method, of course, is the stake through the heart. Contrary to popular belief, this was not simply to kill the creature, but to pin it to the earth, preventing it from rising again. The choice of wood for the stake often carried significance: ash, hawthorn, or even oak, each believed to possess its own protective properties. In some traditions, decapitation was deemed essential. The head of the vampire would be severed and buried far from the body, ensuring that the two could never reunite. This gruesome precaution spoke to a belief that the head retained its will, able to call out to its limbs, seeking reunion even in death. Yet even these measures were sometimes deemed insufficient. To guarantee a vampire's end, the body was often burned, its ashes scattered into the depths of a fast-flowing river. The logic was simple: water, a purifying force, would carry the remnants far from human dwellings, dispersing the darkness and neutralizing its malevolent influence. In some villages, less violent measures were adopted to prevent vampiric transformations. Garlic, salt, and holy relics were placed around graves or homes to ward off the Nosferatu. Iron stakes might be driven into the ground above the coffin, pinning the restless spirit below. And then there were the curious but widespread customs of burying the dead face down or placing a scythe or sickle over the body, measures designed to confuse or injure the vampire should it attempt to rise. These rituals are more than morbid curiosities. They are reflections of a society grappling with the unknown, using ritual and faith to combat the spectre of death. Yet for all their variety, these superstitions share one haunting truth. The fear of the Nosferatu, and of vampires more broadly, is not simply the fear of being consumed, but of what lingers after consumption, the corruption of the natural order, the inversion of life itself. Worse still was the fear of vampirism spreading like an unstoppable plague, consuming not just individuals but entire communities. A single Nosferatu could transform a once vibrant village into a necropolis, where the laughter of children and the warmth of hearth fires were replaced by silence and shadow, the remnants of humanity buried beneath the pall of undeath. Perhaps that is why the Nosferatu endures in our imagination, not as a creature of romantic allure, but as a reminder that even in death, the struggle between light and darkness continues unabated. My dear friends, gather close, for tonight we step into a realm where shadows stretch long and secrets linger. Nosferatu, a name that chills the spine and awakens the primal fears that slumber within us all. This 1922 masterpiece, born of audacious creativity and cloaked in mystery, offers us more than a story. It provides a window into the very essence of horror. Directed by the enigmatic F.W. Murnau, Nosferatu was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. To elude the talons of copyright law, the filmmakers altered names and details. Count Dracula became Count Orlok, a grotesque figure whose rodent-like visage was as unsettling as it was unforgettable. Gone were the English Moors. In their place stood the fictional German town of Wisborg. The tale follows Thomas Hutter, an unwitting estate agent sent to Transylvania to assist Orlok in purchasing a property. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly mundane transaction lies the creeping spectre of doom, for Orlok is no mere man. He is a predator, a creature of the night. As Orlok travels to Wisborg, he brings with him not only death but pestilence, symbolized by the rats that infest his coffin. The town succumbs to despair, its streets lined with death and decay. And at the story's heart stands Ellen, Hutter's wife, whose ultimate sacrifice ensures Orlok's destruction. For it is she who holds him captive until the dawn, when the sun's fatal rays reduce him to ash. Thus, Nosferatu introduced one of the most enduring vampire myths, sunlight as a force of destruction. And yet, this tale of shadow and terror nearly vanished into obscurity. Florence Stoker, widow of Bram Stoker, took legal action against the filmmakers, claiming copyright infringement. The courts ruled in her favor, ordering every copy of the film to be destroyed. Yet, much like the vampire it depicted, Nosferatu refused to die. A handful of prints evaded destruction, smuggled like contraband across borders. These surviving reels allowed the film to endure, to grow, and to achieve the legendary status it holds today. A cornerstone of horror cinema, Nosferatu remains a testament to the resilience of art and to the enduring power of fear. However, the making of Nosferatu is steeped in legends as eerie as the film itself. Let us turn our attention to Albin Grau, the film's producer and artistic architect. During his service on the Eastern Front in World War I, Grau encountered a Serbian farmer whose tale would leave an indelible mark on his imagination. The farmer spoke of his father, a man who had risen from the grave to torment the living, a vampire. The village, desperate and terrified, exhumed the body and performed the grim rituals needed to lay the revenant to rest. This haunting story ignited Grau's fascination with the supernatural, a passion that infused Nosferatu with an atmosphere of dread and authenticity. For Grau was no stranger to the occult. A member of esoteric societies such as the Fraternitas Saturni and briefly associated with Aleister Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis, Grau's fascination with the supernatural permeated his work on Nosferatu. He incorporated symbols of alchemy and astrology into the film, most notably in Orlok's contract, which bears mysterious sigils. These arcane details, drawn from his associations with occult groups and esoteric philosophies, lend the film an air of mysticism, blurring the line between fiction and ritual. Now we must speak of the man behind the monster. Max Schreck, who portrayed Count Orlok, delivered a performance so haunting, so otherworldly, that it sparked whispers of his own nature. Could it be, some wondered, that Schreck was no mere actor but a creature of the night himself? Adding to this eerie speculation is the meaning of his surname, Schreck, which translates to fright or terror in German. Whether by fate or design, his name became synonymous with the primal fear his character evoked. Though history tells us Schreck was a mortal man, his portrayal lingers, a spectre in the annals of horror. But no story of Nosferatu would be complete without the enigmatic figure of F.W. Murnau. The director, whose vision brought Orlok to life, lived and died under mysterious circumstances. In 1931, Murnau perished in a car accident in California. Decades later, his story took an even darker turn. In 2015, grave robbers desecrated Murnau's tomb in Germany, his skull stolen from its eternal repose. Candle wax, later discovered at the scene, suggested an occult ritual. To this day, the skull remains missing, shrouded in a veil of mystery that seems fitting for a man who brought such darkness to the silver screen. Let us pause here, dear friends, and heed a warning about the dangers of occultism, voiced by the legendary Sir Christopher Lee, a man well versed in the shadows of myth and legend. I warn all of you, never, never, never. You will not only lose your mind, you lose your soul. These words ring out like a tolling bell, a caution against delving too deeply into the realms of darkness. For as Nosferatu reminds us, some shadows are best left unchallenged, their mysteries unbroken, lest we risk becoming entangled in their grasp. And so Nosferatu endures, not merely as a film, but as a shadow cast across the collective imagination. Its grotesque imagery, its roots in dark folklore, and the unsettling stories surrounding its creation remind us that the line between art and the arcane is often thinner than we dare to admit. What is the Nosferatu, if not a mirror held up to the fragility of life, the inevitability of death, and the corruption of nature? Yet it is more than a reflection. It is a whisper from the shadows, a reminder that some fears are not meant to be forgotten. And so we are left with a lingering unease, for the boundaries between myth and reality are often thinner than we dare to admit. To dwell on such tales is to invite their shadows into our thoughts, their echoes into our world. When next you venture out into the night, remember this: shadows deepen, whispers grow louder, and the unknown beckons. Be wary, my friends, for the dead travel fast. My dear friends, our tale for this evening has concluded, but our journey does not end here. Visit us again soon. Here in our little corner of the ether, we shall unravel another tale. A story imbued with fear, superstition, and perhaps the occasional sprinkle of fairy dust. We hope you enjoyed tonight's story. Join us again as we delve into the pages of history, folklore, and some things that make us wonder, and perhaps others that make us shudder. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to SkaryTales. We're a small channel, but with your help, we'll continue to grow. Together, we'll explore the shadows and the light of the world's most enchanting and terrifying tales. Until next time, remember that every tale hides a truth, and every truth hides a tale. Sleep well, and good night.